Okay, everybody. My name is Delmar Larsen. I am a professor of chemistry at the University of California, Davis. I'm also the founder and director of the LibreTexts project. You will sometimes hear my name as Del because long time ago I used that shortened name, and there are people here that used it back then before I used my extended name. I don't mind either being used. I just used my full name, just in case you're wondering where it comes in here. So let me find how to move this. Okay. So this was already mentioned, but I'm going to mention it again because it's quite important. You had multiple accounts. Please make sure that those accounts are actually operational. In fact, there were 4 to 5 of them that were sent out here. These are just 3 of the most critical ones. One is making sure that you have access to at least editing rights on a LibreText library, typically one main library. Ignore these credentials. It should erase those. The second one is the homework system, which is going to be the topic of Friday's discussion, addressing ADAPT. You can get an account on there. You should have all received access codes last night. If you did not, then let me know and I can resubmit one for you. And lastly, as part of the ADAPT homework system is the H5P repository, and you can access that directly at studio.libretext.org. And if you just sign in, there's some credentials that were emailed out for you to be able to check it. So again, if you don't have access to this, please let me know. So let's start with where the money comes from in order to be able to operate what we're doing, including this meeting. So over the last years, or actually 14.5 years, the LibreTexts project has been funded by several different agencies, including the National Science Foundation, the U.S. Department of Education, and the California Education Learning Lab, amongst support from other non-governmental agencies, including my campus, the California State University system, and Merlot as part of that system. So okay, so why are you here? Well, there are multiple reasons why people get involved in OER, and we were already talking a little bit about costs as one of the primary mechanisms in order to get involved in it, but it's not the only mechanism and reason why people get involved in building OER. So one way in order to view this is that we have an interest in order to make the textbook of the people. In other words, a public textbook that everyone has accessed, and is predicated on the argument that education and knowledge is a public consumable and hence should be easily obtained. The second one is to make what I refer to as a textbook of the future. And this is to take advantage of online capabilities using many of the aspects that Justin already talked about before in order to be able to build a more advanced textbook than what you would conventionally get from a paper-based book and such. And that no doubt involves technology in order to be able to enable that. And one of the problems with building a textbook of the future is that no one really knows what the textbook of the future is supposed to look like because it's the future, but we're constantly evolving in order to be able to get to that stage. So, the textbook of the people is making a book that is free from external control, free from external financial issues, free to distribute, free to edit and curate, free to customize. The textbook of the future is a textbook of technology, interactivity, engagement. It typically involves advanced pedagogies. And there's no reason that you can't pursue both in building what you're doing. Now, it's typically a big bite of the apple in order to pursue both, but nothing says that your goals can't include being able to make not just a freely available textbook, but something that's more advanced in terms of educating these things. So OER has been around for a while. Long before it was given the term OER. In fact, the first 3 to 4 years of the LibreTexts existence, I didn't even know what that term was. I knew what I was trying to do, which was to generate freely available resources to address the issues I talked about before. However, there's lots of effort in order to promote OER and also to facilitate advocacy around those promotions. So about 5 years ago, the Babson Survey Research Group, now called Bayview, did a survey along with numerous other people who've done these surveys in order to ask what are the major limitations associated with adopting OER. And they identified a lot of these issues that has popped up. Most of us as faculty would probably say that these are quite straightforward things for us to be able to do. However, administrators that tend not to trust what our own faculty believe need to have the community in order to verify these arguments. And these are still applicable today, although the numbers are much better given the rapid development of OER. And the issues that I want to talk about is, typically the aspect associated with hindering OER is quantity and quality. The ability in order to have a resource that has the quality in order to supplant a commercial textbook and that addresses the textbook, or I'm going to phrase it, the course that you want to be able to use that textbook out. The second one is ancillary material in order to augment the use of that textbook. Now, the videos, the PowerPoint presentations, question banks and things like that. So the idea of what constitutes a textbook, or more specifically, what is involved in terms of adopting a textbook, is far more than just a physical book that you take a look at and you work at. Now, the goal of the LibreTexts project is each of these terms, and I don't want to go through them right here because you can read them for yourself, is to be able to provide a mechanism in order to overcome these barriers off of that. I will mention for those of you in California, in a few weeks, we're having a California State OER meeting called Cal OER, and that Babson, the people who originated that survey results, will also be presenting. They've rebranded themselves as Bayview Analytics, and they'll be going over recent studies that they've done, including even an emphasis on what's going on in California there. And if you have an interest, feel free to go to caloer.org in order to be able to register for that. Okay, so let's start with the mission statement for LibreTexts. So this is the statement that I oftentimes like to give publicly. It's a relatively simple statement in that we're implementing a community-built platform for the construction, curation, adoption, and adaption. Each of those four terms are exceedingly important in order to emphasize what we do. Of OER that's comprehensive and get curated at multiple levels. Each of the three bolded C words are critical in terms of understanding our philosophy of what we're implementing. So the community means everybody. Now, this is not a one-size-fits-all approach. This is the answer, and this is what you need to adopt. We're making an infrastructure so anyone can contribute to it, anyone can pull from it, anyone can advance the project in a variety of different ways. OER, the actual definition of OER is contentious in some communities. I'm just going to, for the sake of this conversation, say OER is free or freely available, but it has other aspects that are connected to licensing that I'll be talking about, I believe, tomorrow. Comprehensive, meaning that while the LibreTexts originated from the ChemWiki, which was a chemistry-oriented project, we follow a comprehensive scope. So basically all fields in academia we have an interest in order to pursue. That's horizontally. Vertically, we're interested in both kindergarten up to 12 for primary and secondary, post-secondary, and even graduate level topics. So we're very comprehensive. So in other words, we follow a no gap left behind policy. We also follow a no tech left behind policy, which means as technology, I'm going to phrase that as open source technology emerges in the community, we capitalize on that, bring it into our platform, so everyone who uses the infrastructure can then benefit from that technology. So we follow, again, a no tech left behind policy in order to pursue that. And last is curation, which means that the content we're creating has the ability of being updated and edited and moving forward and having a living experience or a dynamic experience. The opposite of that would be a dead library, and that would be, for example, a series of PDFs, which are very difficult in order to update. However, a lot of OER, or what would be considered OER, is currently housed in PDF formats on many faculty's computers, and it's important. It's an important goal of ours in order to be able to crack into those computers, get access to that, and then integrate it into our platform so everyone can benefit from that. So making things dynamic is important, but I also want to emphasize that making things not just making it dynamic is important, but also to facilitate a curation infrastructure in order to move things forward. So we don't believe that OER ends at publishing. We're not a publishing platform like some of our other fellow platforms out there. Publishing is just the first step. We need to constantly be updating, constantly be curating and improving these things until we get to an opportunity, a position in which we can say that the quantity and quality of our books are comparable or even better than commercial textbooks that are the alternative out there. And we're not there yet. And we're not going to be there anytime in the near future, at least comprehensively, but we can certainly pursue that, and things have advanced quite greatly in order to suggest that it will happen at some point in the future. So what is LibreTexts from a practical perspective? Well, there are three facets in which people use LibreTexts, and it's important to emphasize this aspect. One is as a construction platform. In fact, the portfolio, all the technologies that constitutes the LibreText, we fold into a term that we call the LibreVerse, which you'll be hearing from time to time for the remainder of this week. And it consists of the greatest collection of powerful tools in order to be able to build OER out there. It's used as a dissemination platform. The LibreText platform distributes somewhere in the order of about 750 to 800,000 page views a day. And no other platform has such a comparable magnitude. So it means that when you create something and you want the impact to be great, which is what I think most of us want when we be able to create these things, we can get those things out there to the students. I can argue competently in chemistry that there is no chemistry student in the United States and potentially the world, or at least that has access to English speaking populations in the world, that does not interact with the LibreText project by the time that they get their degree, their bachelor's degree that's out there. And that applies to many other fields. And lastly, as a learning platform, and this is part of the educational mission that is embedded into myself as a faculty and all my team as faculty, in order to be able to say, okay, we want to do more than just distribute the content. We want to be able to generate a platform in order to enhance the educational aspect. Again, dovetailing into the textbook of the future that's out there. So the nature of the textbook has been evolving. Anyone who's been paying attention to this over the last 15 to 20 years understands that if you look at the way the commercial companies have been addressing that, is that they provide a suite of services in order to address, again, these issues that came from this Babson research, the textbook, the ancillary materials, the videos, the enhancements, and all the things that we want in order to make our educational mission better. So we fold in our development in order to reflect the nature of the textbook. So this is the simple map that describes the LibreVerse. And the core of the LibreVerse are our libraries. So we have 15 independently operating libraries, although interconnected, dealing with specific fields: chemistry, geosciences, physics, humanities, social sciences, etc. We have 2 of those libraries that are dedicated to different languages of all the other content in the other languages. One is Spanish in the Espanol library, and the new one is Ukrainian, which is built in order to be able to take all the content in the corpus that we have, which is somewhere in the order of 450 to 470,000 pages, converted into Ukrainian in order to handle the displaced students in the war over in Europe. And then complementing those hubs are these ancillary technologies, including the Adapt homework system, which we'll be talking about a lot, but certainly on Friday. Project Solo, I'll be hinting at a little bit today, but I'm not going to be discussing it in more detail unless anyone has an interest off of it. Jupyter Notebook system, which gives us the ability to embed executable code into our textbook. This is a critical component in order to build the textbook of the future, especially for STEM fields where you want students to have access or at least see code being operating, because it's important for educating STEM students. We have a JavaScript server that's in order to maintain these servers and these technologies that have been established in order to be able to build the textbook of the future. Learning analytics, and I'll talk about that momentarily, to identify how students are learning from the resource. We have a bot server, which is part of the curation infrastructure in order to be able to update our content in order to address current and emerging accessibility requirements. We have a Commons&Conductor, which is one of the platforms that you hopefully have already signed up for an account in order to facilitate the construction projects that's going on here, and forums, which I've mentioned several times today, that's used primarily for curation efforts, but we're also using it in this meeting for facilitating conversations out here. So let's talk about these libraries that's out here. So I mentioned that the LibreText is the greatest centralized distribution infrastructure for OER, at least nowadays. We have delivered over the last 14 and a half years about 820 million page views. We expect to reach 1 billion by the end of this winter. And then that also corresponds to our 15th year birthday. So we're going to have a LibreText Jubilee that you will probably hear more about. We can confirm at least about 6.5 millennia of reading. However, that's an underestimate because we didn't have full capabilities in order to evaluate every minute that every student has used on our site. But this is a lower level threshold up here. These numbers here are still not entirely up to date because I didn't get them put in place off of here. But we have somewhere in the order of about 1,300 books that are remixable that you can tap into. We have thousands upon thousands of independent pages that are as ancillary modules. We have about 1,000 books plus that people, typically faculty, have constructed remixes or customized versions that are stored in their campus bookshelves, while these things are stored on our centralized bookshelves. This number is somewhere again up to 1,000, and these numbers may be addressed. And you can see our traffic has been growing. If you look accumulated pseudo exponentially, certainly growing here nicely. You'll see this big bump here, and this is the COVID bump when many students went online, and then we got that bump, and it came back down when people pretended that COVID was gone, which is not the case. Anyway. So let's talk a little bit of the aspect behind how the LibreVerse and the libraries are organized. So the underlying situation of the OER universe is that the content is heavily fragmented. You could find content, or you could find links to content in a variety of sources. So the Open Textbook Library, for example, is not really a library. It's more of a library guide, which is referatory to showing you where you can find content in the universe. The OER Commons is predominantly a referatory, but they do have repository capabilities that you can find a lot of content. OpenStax, that many or all of us have heard of, they're not referatory. They have a fixed set of books, and you don't customize them on their platform because that's not what they do. Merlot, Open Sony, Galileo, Open Oregon, NOBA, BC Campus, eCampus Ontario, Alberta, Hawaii, Sailor, California Learning Solutions, Oregon State University, and numerous other infrastructures. OER is all over the place in a variety of little nicks and crannies off of there. The problem with that is it becomes difficult in order to find the OER that you want to look for. You want to find content relating to a specific topic, and it's distributed in a variety of places. And most of these technologies are not designed in order to interact well with each other. So it's not a federated system, it's heavily fragmented. And our solution to that is to take the content as much as we can and bring it all into the LibreText libraries. It acts as a central warehouse for people to be able to find things, and it provides a mechanism in order to facilitate remixing, because when we bring it into our platform, we standardize things. So in other words, it makes it easier so that you don't have to go through the effort in order to be able to, for example, copy stuff from a PDF. If anyone remembers how it is when you copy from a PDF into a Word document or some other editing platform, you get lots of junk that comes in there, and you have to cut through and being able to process that. We go through that process through a team of about 100 undergraduate students so that you guys don't need to. And when that's all put together, it then provides a mechanism to facilitate easy remixing of content, which is what we're going to be discussing at one point. But this key point is that we're building a bigger bucket of Legos. So every piece can combine to each other conveniently, as cleanly as possible, in order to reduce limitations associated with remix. So that provides a centralized infrastructure that's out there. It standardizes the content. It makes things interconvertible. You can then build collections, AKA books, although you can also build other collections, for example, the collections of wet labs, which would include the Catalyst or the lab flow content that Justin mentioned, or dry labs, or other learning objects that are out there. And I'll mention that when I talk about the structure of each of the libraries. It provides flexibility, significant flexibility out there, and it facilitates a curatable infrastructure because we are in a living library. And again, I will emphasize this is a distinction between what the LibreText is versus other platforms like Pressbooks and Manifold, in that they are publishing platforms. Their end of the day is once they publish the content. Okay. Our perspective is that's not anywhere close to the end of the day. And we need to be able to build a curation board, which we've done, in order to constantly go over these resources and advance them, because they're still not good enough. Although I love to be able to say that they are not, in order to be able to supplant every textbook in every class out there. Okay, so everyone has editing rights on a library. When you can edit a page, which right now is probably mostly in your sandboxes, unless several of you have created books and have already been moved into a campus bookshelf or a centralized bookshelf. And when you edit, it has this editing bar right here, which has been modified a little bit since this slide has been created, but you'll notice it looks very similar to Word Editor. In fact, the editor technology is called CK12, and it's the most popular open source editing technology on the internet today. It used to be the editor in Canvas and a variety of other sources out there. So in other words, if you can edit in your learning management system, you can edit on our site. But there are other benefits, there are other advanced aspects that require a little bit more nuance than just being able to edit images and edit text that's out there. But nonetheless, this should look familiar to you that's out there. So I mentioned the textbook of the future, and this is an example in which, for my quantum mechanics class, that I've embedded a particle in the box Python code where students can see the code, they can run the code, they can edit the code and run it. Now, for those of you that are not STEM faculty majors off of this specific technology may not be overly useful for you. And there are other technologies you can then capitalize that may be of use for you. But this provides a mechanism in order to, again, build this textbook of the future to advance it, increase interoperability, increase engagement, so that students can actually learn. And there are plenty of evidences or studies in order to argue that you increase engagement, you increase learning that's out there. And if anyone has an interest in order to go through this thing, we can, I can give you a link to the page right here, and we can even go through it at a different point. Okay. So the procedure that we use in order to bring content into the LibreText, the existing OER, is what we call harvesting, which is a term that we're going to be using from time to time. And it's a little bit more complicated than just being able to copy content into our site. It involves going through OER repositories, recruiting people to give OER content into our site, and the students go through, copy, paste, edit, and typeset to a centralized standard. Now, is our standard perfect? No, there is no perfect out there. However, it's flexible in that we can adopt it in order to be able to make it across the board. And it makes it easier for us to be able to do a lot more advanced things out there. We can introduce metadata in order to cross-reference content, either metadata associated with, for example, meta tags, important terms on a page. So when you do a search on something like particle in the box, to use the example before, you could find all the pages that address particle in the box. This is different than the more conventional just do meta tags on the book itself. So you have a far more powerful approach, because our quantum, to follow the analogy of the particle in the box, our quantum is at the page level, not at the book level. And that makes things more difficult for us, but it makes things more powerful for you in order to be able to do that. However, when we have, because we have 460,000 pages of content, we needed a mechanism in order to facilitate remixing, and we implemented this tool called the OER Remixer. This is an example of the OER Remixer, and you'll get your hands dirty and actually touching that, or you can do it right now. You can access it under the tools section on the blue sidebar of at any point on any library. Even if you're not logged in, you can do that. If you're not logged in, you're not able to save it. or at least you have to save it to your save a map into your local campus, not so your local computer, not on our computers. So the idea behind this is to present an opportunity in order to take content from the library and all the pages that I talked about and being able to drag and drop them in order to build your own book. In as simple way as possible in order to be able to organize it. There are several features associated with it that allows you to auto number, to delete pages, to curate pages. But the key point is that the OER Remixer is designed in order to handle content at the page level. It does not manipulate content within the page. That requires editing of the content. So you can think of this thing as just on your computer, looking at moving files around, but if you want to edit the content in the files, you need to open up the file and the corresponding software in order to be able to do it. That's the same thing here that's out there. And you'll, again, learn more off here. I'm biased that this is the best technology out there in order to facilitate remixing, and no one has yet to prove me wrong off of there. So let's talk about the bot server. So the bot servers are not accessible for end users, for faculty, but it's important for you guys to understand that these things exist and that the development team has access to it. And it's not that we don't want to share access to the bots for faculty, it's just the bots can do massive changes and can destroy lots of stuff. And even us who built the box and have been working on it for a long time make mistakes. So we want to be very careful of it. But it does give you the ability, for example, when you bring content in, we can then curate it and do global changes in order to be able to fix them if they're important. For example, I was chatting with someone just yesterday that they brought in content from a resource where they refer to every page as a module, and they didn't want to do that. I can come in and just do a couple tweaks on here and change that globally across their book in order to be able to do that. And there's a range of other things in order to be able to facilitate this central standardization. And this is a key aspect. So things, you have lots of freedom in order to edit things, but you want to standardize it to make it easier in order to be able to remix and compare content that's out there. That bot also gives you the ability, we have a bot that deals with accessibility issues. So when people do certain issues that edits that are not ideal, it will revert them or convert them to an accessible version of that. Learning analytics. So the learning analytics tools has been the idea has been around for a while. We're going to be releasing it hopefully in the next few months. I wish I can show you it real time. However, the development team has it down right now. So there are two types of analytics that one could extract about a book that you have out there. For example, this is visitor analytics or traffic analytics. It basically tells you that this book, for example, OpenStack's college chemistry book, since we brought it in 5 years ago, has accumulated close to 6 million page views, or about 10 years of student reading. And then you can see the growth that comes in here that tracks basically every single book. As we grow, we're getting more people in there. And then you see that COVID bump that's off of here, and you get this stuff here. The key point off of this is that when you create a book, in the next few months, we'll make it so you have the ability to track how your book is being used. So you're getting visitor information, and you're getting traffic and locations and such if possible. Now, I will mention that this technology right now is built upon Google Analytics, and Google Analytics has some issues, especially in Europe and other places, for privacy issues. And we're probably going to be switching away from Google Analytics, which will give you a little bit less or a lot less information about how people are interacting with the resource. But nonetheless, it gives you an idea of, you create a book, you pop it out there, and now you can actually provide some impact, for example, to your dean or to your promotion committee, and say how your book is actually used. But what I'm actually more interested in is not traffic analytics, but it's learning analytics. So 99.9% of all books have no metric in order to demonstrate that they truly are good at what they're supposed to do, which is learning. And the reason for that is it's painful in order to evaluate learning. So the quality of a book is not dictated by how many how many or where the authors come from, or how many letters are after their names. It's directly a function of saying, does this book facilitate learning? And more importantly, does it facilitate learning in a maximal fashion? In order to do that, you need to be able to have a mechanism to evaluate learning, and the learning analytics tools designed in order to do that. And this is an old snapshot of the analytics tool. And again, I apologize, I don't have a more current version of it. The key point is that the analytics will take data from how students interact with your book, and how students interact with the adapt homework system, cross-reference those two materials when you have a framework of learning objectives and learning outcomes in order to be able to evaluate that, yes, you've created this book and that students are indeed learning from them. And you can start to use it to guide not just the efficacy of the book that you've created, but also the efficacy of the pedagogy that you're using that book in order to build that. And this is an example of an 8-year-old set of data collected by Greg Allen, who I believe is in the audience here, when he was a graduate student at UC Davis, and where we did a study and we taught 2 back-to-back classes of 500 students each. It was not a pleasant experience for a variety of reasons. It was the first time we used the ChemWiki, precursor to the LibreText, as the exclusive textbook for a class. And I would never teach 1,000 students in one term ever again. Knock on wood, I probably will do it sometime soon. But nonetheless, this is just very simple data that looks at daily page views, that traffic information that we got here for the class that used the open textbook. And we saw this information in terms of traffic, and we got 2 peaks that are almost in all books. One is that students review the book really quickly, or more likely, more often, that is, in the first part of the class than they do afterwards. And there are a variety of justifications behind that. And second, students are cramming. So it's not surprising that students are cramming, but the information that we got from the traffic analytics was that we can identify how much they're cramming. More importantly, we can then start to do studies, or at least ask questions about how does cramming impact their performance as a mechanism of the chemical education effort that we were pursuing. And it was somewhere in the order of 7 to 10% a reduction in the performance on that class. What I was interested in is what's the impact on the next class and the next class. And that requires more longitudinal adoption of the resources that we are now getting in the situation where we can have a full year all in the LibreText, or as I will be talking about at some point, even full 4 years, because the LibreText chemistry platform, the deliverables are the complete bachelor's degree of a suite of books. So what we did in the summer quarter is that we decided, well, cramming is bad, which we had known before, but we saw numbers off of that. And we wanted to be able to try to make the background higher. So we made weekly quizzes in order to do these midterms. And we did that again. This is an example, again, of using these data in order to guide the pedagogy of how we use these things in the classroom. And that's what's provided in the analytics tool that's out there. Jupyter and Notebook. I don't think we're going to be discussing this in detail during this meeting. However, if people are interested in this, I can certainly go through it. If you go to jupyter.libretext.org, we have the JupyterHub, which is an interface to a cluster of like 250 servers that runs that Python interactivity that I mentioned before, a particle in a box. But you have 30 different languages that you can connect to, including R if you're into statistics, Python, which I already mentioned, to Octave if you care about data manipulation, C++, and a variety of other languages that are implemented. And we can implement them as needed. We have about 5 to 7 of them there, and you can log in directly off of here using the accounts that we have here. And I encourage you to take a look at it. This, again, is necessary for building the textbook of the future, at least within the STEM fields. So I already gave that slide here. I want to mention briefly about the community. So part of the community that we have implemented, part of the point of OER is to build upon the community's work. So this is one example in which I did this, built on what was implemented and released, or at least announced on Twitter, was this individual Free Radical, and I have no idea who his real name is, and he made some Python code in order to do distillation. And you can it shows the steps in order to be able to guide understanding distillation, which could be a little tricky in order to be able to do on the screen, especially when we were during COVID and didn't have a very convenient mechanism for doing that. And I was able to take this code and implement it into my general chemistry class. There are lots and lots of these repositories of code that's been stored in various places, or people who are creating them constantly that can be adopted, used, and moved forward, all following the open model of OER. The Commons and Conductor model. So the Commons and Conductor technology, I know it has a little bit of a peculiar name behind it. It's two-faced, the front face and the back face. So the front-facing version of the Commons and Conductor is our search portal. It's a mechanism for us to be able to do searches on books. Now, emphasize, it doesn't do searches on the individual pages. You need to do those right now on the libraries, although we're working in a way in order to fold it together. So you can identify, if you want to say a book on economics, you can find out all the books that have economics in their terms. Or you want to do a book on chemistry, and you'll find many books on chemistry off of there. So it's a front end catalog. We have different types of Commons and Conductor. We have the central one, which is called Libre Commons sometimes, or the ones that you have the account Commons and Conductor, but individual campuses that are part of our LibreNet, which is the consortium that we have for handling their sustainability, they then get a customized version of this thing. And that's useful for showing their faculty, their students, and other stakeholders what the books are that they have access to. So you can identify books, you can look at libraries, collections, you can find homeworks that are out there, whether they are collections in H5P or collections in ADAPT. You can do searches for what's under development in different libraries or different campuses. You can put alerts out there in order to say when someone creates a book that has a specific term, you'll then get a notification that someone's working on that. For example, you're particularly interested in macroeconomics and you want to know when some resources out there for macroeconomics, you put an alert on there, and then you're going to get a notification when a new book has been compiled or published that's out there. Again, I mentioned the Libre Commons and the Commons and the Campus Commons, which is our branded instances. And you can see them in the upper right-hand corner of your Commons and such. What is more important from our perspective is not the front-end Commons, it's the back-end Conductor. And the Conductor is designed as an organizational tool in order to be able to facilitate building of projects. And the very first step in order to build a project should be to create that project in the Commons and the Conductor. And again, we'll be talking about this in more detail. Behind it, it provides a mechanism in order to facilitate a centralized building tool. You can set your alerts. You can set harvesting requests if you want in order to ask for new materials coming in. You can also provide it as a mechanism to facilitate adoption requests. And that's important in order to get in order to track how your book or resource is being used across the world. It can facilitate peer reviews, intra-team communication. Our preference is that when anyone is asking us about a specific project or development on a specific project, we would like them to communicate through the Conductor rather than sending us emails, because the email mechanism doesn't work very well. And this provides a mechanism that anyone can come in and look at the picture of your project and move it forward. And I'll provide examples of that momentarily. I mentioned is a mechanism in order to facilitate communication from one LibreNet campus to another LibreNet campus, because they all have individual campus commons and such. So let me show you just a snapshot of what this looks like. This is the front end, which is just of the Commons and Conductor at a specific, of the Commons of the LibreTexts. It is right now, I'm just showing 12 of the books that are available. If you go to Commons and Conductor right now, it looks, actually, since it's right here, it looks like this. And it shows the first 8 of the books here. You can come in and do a search off of this thing. And I said economics. And here are the 12 books that come up with those terms. Books that are not compiled or not published don't show up on the search here. So it's meant to be books that are readily available. You can click on it and you say, okay, here are the OpenStax book. Here's the table of contents for the book, and you can get this information. You can even click on any of these things in order to go to the page that's associated with that that book, which is here. You could facilitate peer review. So when you make your book, you can encourage people in order to either adopt the book, report the book, and there are different export options associated with these things. And I'll just mention one, that once a book is published, it automatically comes into the bookstore, which is basically an intermediary to a just-in-time or real-time printer. And this is a way in which you can purchase the book. We have an 8% overhead in order to maintain the technology, but other than that, we're not making a profit. That means that we can actually distribute any textbooks that even have non-commercial licenses in this way, because again, we're not trying to make a profit. The back end looks like this, and it really doesn't do justice on here. So I'm gonna just go to it myself. So this is my version. Now, when you make a new account, you're not going to have pinned projects and recently edited projects because you have no projects that you've created. You can create a project under this section here, and you create a project right there. However, all the projects that we're going on in the LibreTexts, including all those 100 students that are harvesting, they have hundreds and hundreds of projects that are being done at different stages of development, including even the homework system and bringing other things here. I just want to show one project of particular interest, which is this Spanish for advanced healthcare that's being constructed. This is constructed in the state of California. They have a team of individuals here. I'm not sure if any of the team is actually in our audience. It provides a mechanism in order to have status properties and notes associated with it. But the key point here is to facilitate discussions. For example, you can talk about topics of accessibility, and then that has a centralized mechanism that we can go to. And again, this makes it easier for my development team that if there's an issue associated with this project, we can go to it and we can see all the correspondence associated with that project and pick up and answer the question immediately, rather than having to go through emails upon emails from different people at different spots in order to be able to handle that. But then you also have the ability in order to build tasks. And you can make those tasks into Gantt plots, which are useful if you're running an OER program to guide the evolution. You can build peer-reviewed protocols in order to hand out for as one of the stages of development, and also facilitate accessibility view, this mini accessibility compliance review matrix, which I'll be talking about at a later point. Anyone can use the Libre Commons in order to build any book on any platform, but its utility is maximized if you're building a book on the LibreText that's out there. I encourage you in order to play around with it, but this should be the first step in order to be able to build the book that you're moving. Okay, forums. I've mentioned this several times. This is the forum that we have for the curation, mathematics curation board, where when people find mistakes at various spots, whether those mistakes came from the source material or we mistakenly added it in harvesting, we can go in and edit it, fix it, and fix it quite rapidly. And this is what we do that Pressbooks and Manifold doesn't do, because we believe that publishing is not the end game. It's just part of the cycle. We have a chat. If you go to chat.libretext.org, it's a Discord channel in order to facilitate communication. Many to most of my student harvesters, the team members, are on here in order to facilitate rapid responsive things when the forums are not typically designed for rapid communication that's out there. The Adapt homework system, we'll be talking about that quite extensively during the Friday day. It involves several different technologies, including WebWork, iMath AS, which is the technology behind MyOpenMath, H5P, which the studio houses it. And then we have contents that would typically be stored in learning management systems via what's called question and test interoperability, or QTI. The key point off of here is essentially, if you like WebWork and WebWork does everything for you, then there's no reason in order to change from WebWork. If you like MyOpenMath and MyOpenMath does everything for you, then there's no reason to change for that. If your learning management system question does everything for you, there's no reason to change. However, if you want to use WebWork capabilities with iMath AS capabilities, there's no way in order to do it except for using Adapt or connecting it with QTI and making it so that the faculty don't need to care about necessarily the technology that hosts the technology, hosts the question. They are able to use it in an agnostic manner, but you can also take the questions, embed them into your textbook. You can then use H5P, which is not designed in order to be summative, and use it in a summative manner, couple into your Canvas or your learning management system infrastructure. And then at the end of this year, we will have mobile apps in order to be free clickers, personal response systems for classes that are out there. I'm going to skip over this because it's not overly important here. And I don't know why this slide happened again. I will show you, and again, we're going to be focusing on ADAPT quite extensively. So I don't want to go anything more than a topical overview. The H5P Studio, you have access to, like I mentioned before, and it gives you the ability in order to build questions and share those questions with the community. It has about 1,000 questions right now, which is pretty powerful repository, and it's growing rapidly. So it's useful for a variety of purposes. It also has some limitations that I'll be discussing quite extensively that's out there. This is a picture of what the ADAPT homework system looks like for me, with a series of courses that I have, start date, end dates, and has the stuff that you would normally expect behind that. The real power is in the nature of the questions and how you deliver them. And more importantly, and is the reason that ADAPT is called ADAPT, is it has an adaptive learning infrastructure based around static learning trees right now, although that will be more dynamic in the future, which lets us generate a choose your own adventure story to provide some customization for the student's educational experience, which is not provided in any of those individual technologies, although some learning management systems have something similar. Project Solo, which is the last thing I want to mention, was not created in order to emphasize that I like Star Wars. I'm actually more of a Trekker than a Star Wars person. The idea behind this is to build a standalone mini version of the LibreText or the LibreVerse, such that it's open source and that can be run on a variety of different places. So there are countries that will only use the platform if they have the ability in order to embed open source technology. And we implemented that, and we are going to be sharing that within an infrastructure that sets up a networked approach so that people are able to communicate from one instance of the LibreNet, which is our Commons&Conductor, or from the Soloverse, which is the network associated with the Solo infrastructure. And that right there, we're very excited in order to release, and we probably will release it in the next month or so, although if people are interested, we can beta test it. It provides a mechanism in order to host courses, not just to host texts. So it looks like a learning management light, and it provides an opportunity for us, not just in developing countries, but there are many secondary and primary school districts and schools in America that don't have enough money for a full-blown learning management system and have been using Google Classroom, which is not anywhere close to the capabilities that they need. And this is designed in order to be able to handle that issue that's out there. So with all that topical overview, I'll end with what I started, which is our mission statement. We're implementing a community-built platform for the construction, curation, adoption, and adaption of OER that's comprehensive and can be curated at multiple levels. Because it has a very comprehensive, large scope, it has a lot of complexities behind it. It's not easy to master, hence why we have this workshop for implementing it. But once you've mastered it, you can do far more than you can with any other central set of platforms that's available. With that, I will end, and I can address any questions that come up in the chat and such. So thank you for your attention and such. So does anyone want to go through the chat, or anyone want to raise their hand, or do people just want to take a lunch break? Should I just read? Yes, Hannah.
Hi, Delmar. I'm sorry to bother you, but I have a question. I didn't get it really right. How to go to project and create like my own small project in LibreText? because I have my sandbox, I have my
We
project.
we will be dealing with that after lunch. I think that's
Okay.
on the
Oh,
so,
okay.
yeah, you know, so right now it's just laying the groundwork. You have the access. There's a construction manual that I think Josh mentioned that you can see right here. And the construction manual has the basic principles on how you go about doing this thing.
Oh,
The key point is that you get an account on your library and you have a sandbox, and then you can start to create it there. The best thing to do is to use the remixer in order to start building them, building a book.
Oh, great. So I'm working on my own, like on a project, like on a book, into LibreTexts. But can I create like a special small mini project just for me and share it with my students without like?
Yeah, that's the whole point. So you can build whatever you want. So things that are in your sandbox are not publicly available. They have to be published, and then we move it into a campus bookshelf. And that's for us to be able to do some review, not necessarily content review, but making sure the formatting is handled right and accessibility is handled as well as we can, and lots of other issues. So it plays nicely with things. So that's the reason why we just don't let people build a variety of spots. Plus, we also are doing it for fidelity's sake. So we don't want people to edit things that they shouldn't edit. And that's what we had before when we were open, before we had the sandboxes. So.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Amber, are you there? Should I read any of these things? It's difficult for me to read and at the same time, or should I?
What's in the chat right now is a lot of questions about the differences between commons and bookshelves and campus commons and campus bookshelves and what all that means.
Okay. So this was meant to be a topical overview of the LibreVerse without going into finer details. So this is a library. It's a social sciences library, and it's organized in three different content, and that's publicly distributed is organized in three different categories. One is the bookshelves, which is the centralized bookshelves. Those are the books that and the content that is curated by the development team. And that curation board for each of the libraries is dedicated in order to handle the content in the bookshelves. Each of the books in the bookshelves can also be found when you do a search through the Commons system. The campus bookshelves are where you store your customized books. And they're organized by the campus that you're at, not organized by the individual. So you can go in here and say Mendocino College, which just happened to be where my icon was, and then you can see the race and ethnic relations book, which is a remix from Janae's Hunt, and I believe she's going to be talking today for their books. So individuals can have full editing rights to their books when it's posted in the campus bookshelves, and obviously they have full editing rights of anything they create in their sandbox because it's designed for you to play, edit, manipulate, and not worry about interfering with anyone else that's out there, hence the term sandbox, or why the term sandbox is done. Lastly, the content is stored on the learning objects, which are not conveniently organized around books, but they're organized around other aspects. For example, in chemistry, they're organized around labs. In this case here, we had interactive fossils, which was something we put together for anthropology, or teaching materials off of that. So different libraries have different levels of development for their learning objective section. And it's just basically growing that's out there. So when you, we will create a sandbox, we'll create a campus bookshelf for your campus at the point that you publish it. So at the point that you request the book to leave your sandbox. So we'll find it. If you don't have a campus sandbox, we'll create it for you and move it in. But we don't want to create it before anything goes into it because it's just going to be an empty sandbox and we have to curate a whole bunch of empty sandboxes. And we prefer not to do that. And we have gone through that experience before. You can create team sandboxes. So if you want multiple people in order to be able to have the same sandbox in order to build and remix from there, but you need to ask us for team sandbox. It's not created automatically by your account because your account is a individual account that we had created for you. That's not hard to create, but we can go about doing that at any point. I will mention, since I'm talking about the campus bookshelves and the books in the bookshelves, is that we are the key is in order to get campuses in order to sign up to be part of the LibreNet, and we're asking that campuses sign up when they have more than 5 books that are. Are you guys there?
Yeah, we can still hear you.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. It looks like the internet was stalled on my side. At least I don't see any. Okay. So if a campus has more than 5 books, then we ask them to be part of our LibreNet consortium, which right now costs $1,000 a year, which is about 1/10 of the cost that would be for press books, and even cheaper than Manifold. And again, it's part of our sustainability because we want to make sure that we stick around for a long period of time. And while our grants are very important in order to build these things, they don't provide long-term sustainability efforts. Now, I think I hope I addressed that question. That was sort of a stream of consciousness as we move forward. If you want to, actually, I don't want to step outside the bounds of what I'm supposed to be talking about here, because I can easily talk for a long period of time, and we have a structure in order to dedicate these things. So unless there are any other questions that I should be addressing, and like I said, I see lots of things in the chat. We can take a break until the next presentation.